Hello, my name is Kornel Lesiński. I work for FT, which stands for Financial Times. But today I'm going to tell you a little pitch about, by now, an old API that I think is really, really nice. It's been a part of HTML5 back when it was called Web Applications 1.0. It's called server-sent events, and it came from an idea. What about if the server could control a web page? Nowadays, you probably notice as WebSockets these days, which you can use for streaming any data real-time, any events real-time from the server. But back then, we had only XHR and long polling and a comet pattern. And the good thing is about the XHR thing, it's compatible with everything. If you want to set up WebSockets, you need to have a special library. The spec is 50 pages long. And it doesn't work with proxies. It doesn't work with mobile networks unless you use encryption. It's pretty painful to set up. On the other hand, Ajax works everywhere. So what if you could have something that is as simple and compatible as Ajax, but almost as powerful as WebSockets? And this is exactly what Server-Sent Events API is. So if you want to have a real-time chat, you can use Server-Sent Events to stream new chat messages to the browser. You can stream logs from your server to observe what it's doing. You can have notifications. So for example, have you noticed on github.com, when somebody adds a new comment or pushes a new commit, you instantly see this on the page without reloading the page. This is because github.com uses exactly this API, server-sent events. API is that simple. You create new event source object. You tell it URL, which will I'll explain in a second, which will have the events from the server, and then you can listen on events on that object. And what server sends is a nice trick. It basically streams a file very slowly. It's not a new protocol, it's HTTP. It's a text file that contains lines, and each line is a message that you want to send to the browser. So whatever you can use to send lines of text to the browser, you can use to power Server-Sent Events API. And you don't have to handle reconnections yourself. You just create the object, and it's browser's problem to reconnect when server loses connection. And the browser will intelligently manage the connection for you. So the file you send from server-sent events is data : and the bit that will be event.data. It can be plain text, or you can chuck JSON there and decode it on the client, and then 2 line breaks to send it off to the browser. The protocol has a few more features, but it's so simple that instead of being 50 pages of WebSockets protocol, the whole thing fits on one screen. So you can send multiple lines, prefixing every line with data : You can name each event. For example, if you're streaming events from your database, you can send your database key in a line that starts with AD : and the line. So when the browser loses connection and reconnects again, the browser will send HTTP header, last event ID, so you know which was the last message that the browser has received successfully, and you can continue streaming new messages. You don't have to resend the old messages. Or in a chat message, instead of ID, you could say, you could put a timestamp to know when to send new messages to the user instead of resending the whole chat log of a message. You can tell browser if it loses connection, how long it should wait before retrying the connection. So if your server is overloaded and you cannot handle more connections, you can tell browsers to wait longer. And in the case you need to support super flaky connections, and you probably do, you can send comment lines every few seconds just to tell all the browsers, proxies, and everything that handles TCP/IP between that you're still using that connection and they shouldn't close it. So the cool thing is, it lets you tell the browser that something happened very cheaply. Because it's a regular HTTP connection, you don't need a special server. Of course, you're using Node, right? It works with things like Nginx. It works with mobile ISPs. It works with all the proxies that can be in between. If your server is overloaded and closes connections, that's not a problem. Browser will reconnect for you. So you can close the connection, and it will fall back to something that technically is very similar to AJAX polling. Automatically, it's built into every browser except Internet Explorer. Like I've said, you don't need any complicated library for this because it's so simple and it's all built into the browser. So on the browser side, you don't need anything. If you're writing in Node, all you need to know is that the content type has to say text event stream. In older browsers, this request has to be same origin. Some browsers support cross-origin event sources. All browsers support same origin. And then you just write to your response object in Node. If you're very desperate and you only have PHP on your server, you can do that, but I wouldn't recommend that. Your server is going to look like this, simply because PHP cannot handle so many connections that are open for so long. Event Stream will try to keep a connection open as long as it can. Like you see, the browser support is super ancient. It's been a long time since it was introduced, except Android 2 and IE. So in short, that is servers and events. There are polyfills for these browsers because it's like AJAX on steroids. So there are polyfills based on AJAX that will give you almost the same performance. The limitations compared to WebSockets are you cannot stream binary data. So if you're trying to stream images, video, or something like that, you probably want to use WebRTC or WebSockets. It's only real-time from the server to the browser. If you want real-time data from the browser to the server, like in an action game, you want to use WebSockets. But if you want chats, notifications, everything that needs to get data from the server at any time, very fast, but can communicate with the server, falling back to AJAX, this is a perfect API because it's very simple and very cheap. In case of if there are no notifications, if you don't have any messages to send, which actually on a regular web page is most users most of the time, then you don't even waste a full HTTP request. The browser will make its half of the request and wait for a response from the server that doesn't even have to come. So it's super cheap compared to WebSocket that does like full handshake, back and forth, even if you don't plan to send any messages, even if you don't have anything to send. So check out Event Source if you want to make your websites respond automatically without reloading to whatever happens on the server, and you don't want to set up complex servers, and you don't want to deal with extra infrastructure for it. You can just run it on your existing server. Thank you.
Just for the record, I wanted to add that with sockets, you can have a socket connection through Nginx, for example, and it only takes 16 lines of configuration or something like that.
OK, well, that's infinitely larger config that is required for Event Source still.
You mentioned before that lost connection is handled somehow, right? And resumed from any point. How is the implementation done or covered? Do you need to cover it, or is it out of the box?
So on the browser side, when you lose a connection, the browser will try to reconnect automatically as soon as possible.
What happens to the events that occurred between your lost connection and the time you reconnect?
You cannot know for sure what happened. The browser will remember the last event ID that it saw and successfully delivered. So if you send ID with every event that you send to the browser, like you have data colon and data and ID colon and then an empty line, then every one of your events will have an ID. And when the browser reconnects later, it will send the last ID that was delivered successfully.
Okay, so it's up to me as a developer to send all the missing events if
Yes.
need be.
Then on the server, it's up to you. You read that last event ID HTTP header and decide what that means, whether you're changing your SQL query or whether you're streaming from a file or whatever that means. Yeah, it's up to you.
Does it confirm that client actually received that, or a server treats it as UDP, so just send it and forget it? If he got it, perfect. If not, whatever.
Server-sent events are based on TCP/IP, so you have the sort of guarantee of delivery that TCP/IP offers.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.